We
You
need
having a
you
hot
over
flash,
here.
Dave?
No, I just don't like winter. I mean summer.
He's a reptile.
I love the summer.
Okay, everybody ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to our regular board meeting. If you can join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Put a handful of nuts in my mouth.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Trying to say the Pledge of Allegiance and you're like,
On TV now too.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, you gotta watch it.
I like my P's and Q's.
Okay. First item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Move on to the board will consider to approve the minutes of the August 8th and September 5th, 2017 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of August 8th and September the 5th minutes.
I'll second that.
Sorry. Second by Tammy. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Approval of the bills. The board will consider approval of the payment of the bills. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? I need to note that I need to abstain from approving check number 103290 in the amount of $700 to Two Guys Flooring. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And the simple budget.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening, board members. Didn't get a chance to say hi, so welcome tonight. As of the end of August, we've received 11.4% of our revenues, and we've only spent 6.0% of our revenues. So that's about $4.7 million we've received and 2.4 we've spent out. So again, we're in a good place. Really early in the budget, but it still looks good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to communications. We'll open it to public comments. Are there any public comments tonight? Okay.
Okay, so thank you for giving me a minute to visit with you. So I'm just going to take you back.
Oh, sorry.
My name is Amy Barker, and I live at 13887 Highway 150 South. Anything else? No, you're good. My firstborn. Well, thank you too. Man, I got it. I got this. Anything else I can do for you tonight? No. Oh dear. Okay, so here we go for the third time. I'm going to take you back to a conversation that happened in my home a week ago. We have a little boy, well, two little boys that have some issues that have come to our home that we adopted, that we love these little boys just like, I mean, they were born into our home as if they were. They are kind of porcupines, so a lot of people don't connect with them and keep a relationship for a long time. However, I am here to tell you, and thank you, and especially to George, and I called him the next morning and I communicated to him. Last week, our 11-year-old came home and said, so how was school today? And typically the answer is not, great day at school, because he would love to be out doing something other than in the classroom. And he said, it was a really good day. And it all started this morning because of Jewel. So a little bit of background, Jewel Wagner is one of your bus drivers. She drives the Highway 150 route for the elementary school kids for the Aspen Elementary and transfer bus to UME. And I said, it started from Jewel? And he said, yeah. And now this is 5:30 at night. And he said, yeah, this morning she was headed up the highway. She actually slowed down, almost stopped at our driveway, opened her window, and yelled and said hi this morning. So I am here to tell you, thanks for having your professional staff with a personal touch. I called George, and I really appreciate that. I know it didn't take a lot out of her day. She was, on her route. She was headed up to the top of 150. Her route was probably to start, I don't know, in another 20, 30 minutes. But she took that time. She knew that they were headed out to meet the middle school bus, which he is now on. And that meant a lot. And I just wanted to tell you as a district, thank you for supporting and creating those feelings with your staff that they love these children. That was super important to me, because especially this little guy that just doesn't connect with a lot of people on his own, Jewel went that extra mile, and it meant a lot in our home, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other public comments tonight? Okay, then we'll go ahead and move on. So we're down to our discussion items. Our first item for discussion is reduction of board members from 9 members to 7 members. So there's a lot of information in your packet. I put together the figures that I put together with our board attendance for the past 3.5, 4 years, and then the number of board members in each district across the state. So hopefully everybody's had time to look at that. Pretty much, I'm not for sure exactly what it would take to change if we did make the change. I don't know, Jeff, if you have that information. Did you?
I talked to Amanda. She wants to do a little bit of research on her own, Amanda Hutchinson, and she's checking on the election deadlines and everything else. It looks to me like it would be 90 days, just based on the statute, before the date that you put in an application. And I also did more research on whether or not we can do this with resolution. And it's interesting because there's a statute on, a very, very specific statute addressing how to create different election districts within a school district, and whether or not board members will be at large, or whether they will be attached to a particular part of the district. And there are specific statutes on what we do if we have a vacancy on the board, but there is nothing within the statutes or in case law that addresses determining the number of board members a board of trustees will have. And I think that being the case, the default is just the general powers of the board, which are under Wyoming Statute 21.3.105. They give the board the authority to govern itself. And I think it would have to be done by resolution. And we talked about this before. Nothing's really changed. I just did a little more research on it. I've also tried to call the state Board of Education, because they regulate a lot of this stuff for districts. If you're starting a new district or something like that, to see if they have any rules. And I looked through their rules briefly. There was nothing there, but maybe they've got something hidden away somewhere. And so I thought I would just consult with them. And I know the last time we did this, we spoke with Brian Farmer, who represents the School Board Association, and he thought we were on the right track. But in any event, that's kind of where we're at. Something may change depending on whether or not Amanda finds something, or if the State Board of Education has an opinion on this. And if that's the case, I will just let you know.
Okay. Okay, thank you. for that. So Dave,
From looking over the information you've provided, it looks like our average attendance is around 7. The average school board size in the state's around 7. And my concern is we need to be around 7. That's where I'd like to see us move to. There needs to be a timeline on this, so if you're planning on getting input from the community, we could do that in the next couple of weeks and then do something either in first board meeting in October, an action item. It would have to be second meeting, I imagine, but that's where I'm coming from. I don't know how much more discussion we could talk about it, but I'm just concerned on reducing the size at this time. Thank you.
I'm curious why we went away from why it's all at large and not districted out.
We don't use the small outlying. Is that what it was for? Didn't we have?
Yeah,
outlines?
Madam Chair, members of the board, and this is from my recollection, which is getting worse year after year. But what I can recollect is probably the biggest challenge was Hilliard. They had a representative from Hilliard, and he continued, had to run again and again because we couldn't find anyone to run from Hilliard. And it just got to the point where he couldn't do it any longer. And so at that point, he presented to the board that it went out large. So really the outline areas, there were Hilliard, Almy, and even in town, they were districted. I think it goes all the way back to when we had UNA 2 and UNA 3. And when we consolidated that, that's how long ago this became 9 members representing different parts of our community. If you look into the history of Evanston, Hilliard had its own school, Almy had its own school. When we combined, it just made sense to have a representative on that school board. So why it went away, I remember I was there at the meeting, but it was more just because they couldn't get someone to run from Hilliard. Yeah.
Right.
And it was probably at least 3 times he had to run, and he did out of service for the community because no one else volunteered, but he just kept up and get 7.
Also, I think there was something about the number of voters voting from each of those districts.
Yes.
That you'd have 42 votes from Hilliard.
Have a majority.
People in Evanston that would run for office and get 700 votes, but if, had to go to the Hilliard area.
Well, I would be concerned that we would lose representation. I've been in favor of reducing it up until I thought about it more since the last meeting. And, my concern is that some of these outlying areas or whatnot would lose representation that way. And I would be in favor of redistricting or whatever and putting it out that way. So that's where I'm at right now.
to going back
How
at
would you
large? Or-
redistrict it?
I think that would have to be something we would do with Amanda or whatever. That's going to have to take some work with everybody. I'm not asking for an unfair representation, but I am asking for a fair representation.
I don't know that we would necessarily lose representation. I think obviously the majority of the population is in Evanston, and if we lost 2 trustees, chances are real good it's going to be, those people that want to have someone from the Almy area, Beartown, or Bear River, or Hilliard. I mean, they would still have the ability to run and be on the board. I do agree with Dave that 7 is a much more effective number than is 9. If what we need to do is adopt a resolution prior to next year, in order to sort of do that for the election cycle, what I would propose is that we draft a resolution, hold a public hearing, so that the public can see exactly what it is we're resolving to do before, and they have that in writing. Hear from the public, hear from Hilliard, hear from Almy, and then see what we do. Then see what we want to do after that. But at least draft what it is we're proposing into a resolution format, and open it up to the public, publish it, and open it up to the public for comment before we do anything else.
Madam Chair, I might be able to help Kirby just a little bit. The minimum number of board members to be at large has to be 2, so you can't have less than 2 members who are at large, whether you're 7 or whether you're 9, and then the remaining 5 or 7 board members, as the case may be, could be assigned a resident district within, or a thing they call the resident area, trustee resident area. However, the board decides to divide up those areas.
Okay.
And that would have to be done by resolution. There is statute on that, which is sort of odd that they have something so specific there without addressing the number of board members.
Okay.
I guess I don't still understand what's been wrong with 9. We've been a dysfunctional board. We very seldom have any heavy debate about anything. When you do look through the numbers, maybe the average is 7 in attendance. Maybe that average is 5 with only having 7 board members, and that means 4 votes make the decision. Is that correct?
The quorum would be 4 if you have a 7-person board, yes.
I think we have too much on our shoulders to let 4 votes make that decision for us all the time.
That's not true.
I don't. I disagree. But that's okay.
How many does the city council have?
5.
And they're,
City council doesn't represent Beartown and Hilliard and Almy and
how would they represent 12,000 people?
Yeah.
I do think that we, right now, have a good representation of the community. We all have very different experience and bring very different things to the table, and I would really hate to lose that by eliminating, 2 seats. I guess I don't see a need for it to change it to 7. Oh, God. There you go. You like that?
We already have peanuts.
I don't know that I would agree with redistricting, because I feel like that really, according to where a person lives, that really limits maybe more qualified. What if there's 2 really qualified people in one district? And I know that we do this with other election positions or elected positions, but I would hate to limit people to, what Ryan was saying. Well, what if nobody will run? And then what if it's just one person that will run? And what if somebody else? I think the things that we deal with the outlying areas is mostly transportation and start and stop times. Is that right?
Well, I don't know. There's times that the outlying areas have a fluctuation in student attendance or student population because of, in agriculture, the generational gaps. These kids grow up and then you start over and they have kids and, whatever. So at different times there's different interests in the school. But, I think that people in the outlying areas have every bit as much concern for the welfare of their children in the school as, and I'm not saying there's not qualified people in town, but, we've never had a problem filling board seats since I've been on here. I don't think we'd have a problem filling seats if that was the case.
Do we have anyone from Almy on the board?
We don't right now, but that doesn't mean that they would
Well, that's what
not want to run.
But they still could. That's what I'm saying. If you don't district it,
I
somebody.
understand they can still run, but, they may not get the same representation if you.
And see, Kirby, I look at it much like the county council. We have only 3 members, not county commission. Sorry, I'm at work still. we have 3-member county commission. And for many, many years, 2 of those 3 were from Mountain View. Doesn't mean that they can't represent the rest of the county effectively. We don't have one from Lyman, one from Mountain View, one from Evanston. They represent the county as a whole. And whether they're all 3 from Evanston, whether they're all 3 from the valley, or whether you get a mix of that, I think you have people that understand they represent the interest of everyone, and I don't see why that wouldn't be the same, whether we're 9, as it is now, where we represent everyone, or whether we're 7.
Right. And I would just say that there's also been lots of controversy over the commissioners and where they're from and how those seats are filled, and, depending on whether there's 2 from Evanston and 1 from the valley, then the valley feels slighted, and if there's 2 from the valley and 1 from Evanston, then Evanston feels slighted. This isn't a,
But they get reelected.
but, and so,
It's all about the voters. They make those decisions. When they're made, they're made. I don't understand this representation thing. We have representation. There's no problem. In fact, if anything, in the last less than 10 years, this board approved an ag program that we put into the high school, which represents all those agriculture people, which never had a program, ever, and you'd have to admit that kids have benefited from that program.
I absolutely admit
Yeah,
and,
okay,
and
then
I'm
my
glad that we
question
put
is,
it.
why didn't this board get going 40 years ago? Okay?
I agree.
didn't
I'm not
have the
saying we
leadership.
made bad decisions.
No, so I don't
But if you
understand
use
where
that
you're- I don't-
argument,
I
then
don't-
why are we changing the board the way that it is,
Because I
it's
think we
already
need
there.
to be, I
So-
have an opinion of 7, and that's just where I'm at. So,
Well,
we can kick the
and I
tires.
can have an opinion
I
that
know, I
it's
know.
district, and I mean,
I know, we
that's-
can kick the tires for a while on this, but I think we need to get a resolution and move forward and see what happens.
I think if you did a population or census, you'd find that very, very few people lived in Albion, Hilliard, and those areas 10 years ago. When you drive through there, there's all kinds of housing developments that have taken place. I went to high school here in the 60s, and we had one bus that came from the Hilliard area down here. And maybe 20 students, I guess, and on snow days, they didn't bother to come. Again, my opinion, I just don't see what's been broken with 9.
Well, again, as somebody who's represented councils like this for 25 years, I can tell you that the more effective and more functional groups are the 5 to 7 kind of groups. It just works better and more efficiently, and quite frankly, it's not, we don't get paid, so it's not that much of a cost savings, but there would be a little cost savings, I suppose, with
Peanuts.
killing trees and peanuts and stuff, I guess I mean, I know we have a representative government, and we are the representatives that have been elected, but I really would like to hear what the public has to say, and if those people from Hilliard and those people from Almy want to come in and express that when we open this, great. Let's hear from them. Like I say, I would like to have at least a resolution to reduce the size, leave it all at large, and then really open it up to those people to come in and express their opinion. And we all may change our minds. I can't tell you that my mind is set right now. I know where I'm leaning, but that's not to say that if I hear from the public that they want something else, I'm not going to change. So that would be my proposal.
I don't understand the resolution first.
You put in
Can't we-
writing what
can't
you're
we
trying to
just-
do.
Can't we just do that without the press do that without the board doing that?
Why can't we draft a resolution to say what we mean? Why would we rely on the press to do that for us? It's just a communication thing. We draft in writing what it is we're proposing. We put it on Facebook, we email it out. The press certainly can help with that, but we draft in writing what it is we're trying to do.
But all
And
of
then
us
we
aren't
invite
trying
the
to do
public.
that.
We can vote on sort of the content of a resolution, and then we invite the public, but we're not voting on the resolution yet, Kay. All I'm saying is that I think a majority of us, if I'm doing the math, a majority of us would like to reduce it to 7 at large. We would draft a resolution to that effect. We don't vote on that yet, and then invite the public to come tell us their thoughts.
Madam Chair, members of the board, if I can just make a suggestion. I think probably the best way to move forward is to put a resolution together, have Jeff and I pen a resolution for the work session. The 1st of October, you guys can agree to that point if that's a resolution, if that's what you're looking for moving forward. Well, and then at that point, on the regular board meeting, which is a week later, you could decide if you want to move forward with the resolution. Give you a chance to look at the draft resolution on the first meeting, move forward on the second meeting. It's really pretty easy for us to send out a communication to every parent, every stakeholder, put it in the paper also. We could put the resolution out and just get feedback that way too. So before any decision is made, before I guess we even got to the point of a public hearing, we'd like to get some feedback and see kind of where it lies for you guys to have that information. I'm curious.
I also would like to say, I still think this is part of the agenda that started 2 years ago. Yeah,
I wasn't here 2 years ago.
kind of a move when we were struggling with the assistant superintendent, the same thing came up then. Because, I can't discuss what happens in the executive session, but, I don't think it came out like everybody thought it would come out. And with a smaller board, it might have.
Well, since I wasn't part of that and wasn't here, I can assure you, Kay, that that's not my agenda.
Kay, I'm probably the one that brought it up in that point in time 2 years ago, whatever. It had nothing to do with the superintendents. It was one of the things I talked about in running for the board that I felt needed to be. Two things I felt. One thing was I thought we only need one superintendent, and I thought this school board needs to be reduced down to 7. I haven't changed any. No agenda. Simple as that. Okay? Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and, we'll look at that
I'll put
resolution.
something together.
Okay,
I should have said Jeff to put something
Yeah.
together, but I threw
Like-
myself in there.
okay.
Look at it.
So we can look at that, next meeting, and then if we're good with that, then we can throw it out for some public input
And I
after
agree with
that.
Jamie. I would want to hear, I mean, I've had an opinion on this for a long time, but I really would like to hear the input of the community and staff in the district and see what they think about it. Because I am leaning one direction too, but I can be persuaded depending on what the public thinks.
The only other thing I have concerns about is, Jeff, you're gonna have to find out what the timeline is,
Yes,
because we can't drag this thing through Christmas and into the next year and the year after. And
I'll find out for sure.
okay, thank you.
So the
then
problem I
it's gonna
have
get
with
back
creating a resolution
get
right
back with
now
Yes.
is that it doesn't even give the public an option for redistricting, or for districting the areas. So, I mean, you're effectively
We can
shutting that down with the resolution at this point, in my opinion.
definitely put that on the survey.
We could do 2 resolutions. Do one for that as well.
If we want to get, if we
It's up
want to
to the
have
board.
all options out there and get public input, we can do that as well.
Sorry, peanuts. Sorry. Yeah, I don't want to cut off that option, Kirby. I don't necessarily think it's necessary, but I don't want to cut off the option either. And I don't want to prohibit necessarily or let the public think that we're not going to listen to that kind of input. So whether we put that out as a survey or whether we put that out as 2 resolutions, I'll let Jeff and the superintendent figure that out. But like I say, I just think that it's worth discussing, it's worth having some input, and let's figure it out from there.
Okay. So we'll include both options in our information gathering. Okay? Okay. Anything else on that? Okay, let's go ahead and move on down to our next item, which is school safety and security update. And then the Enrolled Act 93 tentative timeline.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this isn't on. First about security, safety and security updates. Probably the best news that I can tell you is last week we got together with the school facility representative, Lance Johnson. There is funds available for our district to look at improving our security measures in our schools, from controlling access to also, believe it or not, communication. There's more money for walkie-talkies than we could ever spend. But what happened several years ago, there was a capital construction component that went through the legislature for school security. So we have those funds, as long as also with some major maintenance money that can be used. Up to 10% of our major maintenance can be used for school security. So with John Davis and Mr. Dennis, we did talk about probably the next step would be to join with the School Facilities Commission and actually hire with those funds an architect or an engineer to come in and survey each of our buildings and talk about especially entry control and security measures, which would include I think panic hardware, whatever you want to call that, software, and methods for our office staff especially to be able to communicate quicker with the first responders. Access control? Yeah. Yeah. So you can, right now, EMS is the best example. There's a button underneath the secretary's desk which locks every door, and they shut. That button's also, I probably shouldn't tell you, the button's in the principal's office and another location. So they can lock that building down rapidly.
Does it lock every classroom door?
It does, and shuts them. They're magnetically opened, and it'll shut them, lock them. Exactly. Yeah.
So if we were to look at that now in some of the older schools,
Mhm.
are they all magnetically?
No. That would be what this company would do, is they would evaluate each school for their needs. For example, probably Horizon would be the next easiest to secure because of the way it was designed and built. It's very close. The high school is probably the largest need just because of the number of individuals that travel through that school. But each school has an opportunity, especially through the airlocks, to provide either a lock system on one side where they'd come in and hit a button and it would be a video interface, then they could be buzzed into the school. That's fairly easy to do and inexpensive, but there may be other, I think the high school is going to take some redesign, just because the main entrance for lunch, that's where the kids hang out front. Also, there's 25, 26 doors in that facility. There are some that open every hour because of access out of our building and access back into our building. After 9/11, we actually shut down all the entrances except one, which was not very popular with anybody except Mr. Bennett and myself. Yeah. But those are options that we'll have to look at and do a security kind of a scan and present back to us in terms of what we want to do with that. The good thing is there is money available that we can use only for that. I only picked up the high school $55,000 for communication, which right now it looks like it's only two-way radios. $55,000 worth of two-way radios is, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. That's fairly old. We'd like to see if we can adjust with something else, either intercoms, phones, but whatever. So, yeah, so Jaren will actually start that work. We will have to go through the process of identifying an engineer or an architect. We just can't, because it's school facilities money, we just can't hire somebody. So there's a procedure that we'll follow. It will take a little time, but hopefully we'll just get on that and get moving and get someone selected to start reviewing that. So that's the security update of the buildings. About Enroll Act 93, which is the school security, safety and secure schools, and of course the carrying for district employees. Just a little update. I spent the morning with the Southwest superintendents, all of them, and we talked about this. The main reason we got on the topic is Wyoming School Board is leading a group that's studying this. They are going to propose a policy. They've already given us a draft policy, but they're going to work through some of the kinks. This includes from some very staunch supporters of guns in schools and some very staunch individuals that don't want guns in schools, and then individuals that just kind of want to make sense of this. That process is not very far down the road yet. They're just doing research now, gathering information about school shootings, and more or less safety in schools. My hope is that in time we can get that research. We can also get the policy that Wyoming School Boards drafts. Asking those superintendents how many are pursuing this policy, only one in our region is pursuing it. Kind of like we are. They've done a preliminary meeting like we did in June, and that is Star Valley. But they're not very optimistic. The reason why they're not very optimistic is because they contacted their liability provider, and they said as soon as that policy is approved, they will not cover them any longer. The interesting thing with that is that's our same provider. We called our provider and asked, and that was right when this bill went through. And at that time, they weren't sure. They thought we'd be okay. But this is as late of the last 2 months that that's the report. The districts that are using state insurance for their liability carriers have also been told as soon as that policy is approved, they will no longer be able to be insured, their liability insured.
Straight. The state insurance pool, funded by the legislature,
Yes.
who passed this bill,
Yes, exactly.
is not going to carry your insurance if you adopt a policy adopting this bill. Have I got
Yes.
that right?
That was discussed today at length. So basically, what was passed was really to, I think, start down this path. But right now, it's potentially that we can't be insured if we got a policy in place that approved this. So with all that information, this is what I suggest we do. And this is kind of a timeline that I would like to present. I think when we talked before in June, it was pretty clear that the board wanted to proceed with at least exploring the possibility of this policy. So this is what I suggest. After today, that we put a committee together of law enforcement, school district employees, parents, and we start working with the draft policy. With the information that you guys provided, some feedback, mostly about training and psychological evaluation, if I remembered that right. Put a draft policy together. Give us some time to do that, do it right. 10-3, start this committee. So in October, we'll create a draft. At that point, the group that I really think is linked to this policy is our own staff. So I think we need to survey our staff and find out what they're thinking. Yes, if there's no one interested or if they're 100% opposed, that's information I think you guys need about this policy. So give us until, I put December 12th to put this policy together, let you guys look at the draft policy in December. And what I want to avoid is, I guess, hysteria or people storming the board thinking that we're going to do this without input. I think it's important that you have a chance to see what this draft policy looks like, developed by a committee. And then once you guys, if you're okay with it, great, we'll start going out, we'll have a public hearing, we'll survey our community after that. So if you get the draft policy presented in December, we'd have the board vote on first reading of that policy on the first board meeting in January, and then we'd go out to public comment, a hearing, whatever you want to call it. Probably, I put 123, have a community forum on school safety and security policy discussion. That would give you really a whole month after first reading to get feedback from the community. It's to see if we still want to go forward with this policy. We will by then, of course, know if we will be able to have our liability insurance carrier, if they'll stay with us. If you know about our liability insurance coverage, every employee of our district has $1 million coverage. If they're performing their duties, their scope of their duties as outlined in their job description, they are covered by the board. If they step outside of their responsibilities and their job description, they're not covered by the board. They're on their own. So when they violate the law, they don't get liability insurance is the way to look at that. So, well, that's going to be an interesting thing. And this also gives us time to, yeah. Yeah. So I did put that by 2/13, the board would vote on the second reading of the policy. And then this would go into effect, if approved, July 1. I think it gives us time. From what I heard from you guys, the training, the evaluations, it's going to take time for any of our employees to be able to do that. And then we're also going to have to develop how the board will approve those applications if we're going to go through an application process. And I don't think any of you wanted this to go into effect probably before next school year, so that's the timeline I've set. Again, it's my draft. I'm just making these suggestions as we move forward. It's interesting that I mentioned to the individuals that said that their insurance provider would not cover it, that ours said they would be okay. I think they've changed their mind and realized that they probably won't be okay. So we need to have to contact them again. I'd like to get that in writing. My guess, there's going to be someone out there that will cover the district, but it could be pricey.
Well, and it may just be that we have to obtain an umbrella policy separate.
Yeah.
Everyone drops all the other insurances and goes with the one, it might not be that.
Yeah. So, if you remember, we had trouble with our liability insurance provider, was it 10 years ago now? Because of our diving boards. No, we lost our high dives for a couple of years because we couldn't find a provider that would cover us. No archery, we couldn't camp. Yeah, bikes. We could go camping, just no fire. But since then, we were able to find a provider that is more local. They're not from back east, and they realize that that's what you do in Wyoming. And so we can do some of those activities. I still don't think we can do archery. Still think that's out. So that's where we are with that.
So Ryan, would the game plan be to try to have this ready for the next school year? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes.
And we'd spend this one putting it
Yeah,
together, something
yeah.
that's really concrete and workable?
Yeah.
We can
One-
agree on?
One thing about this topic, and you guys know this, it's very polarizing.
Well, sure it is.
There's very few people in the middle. They're either on one side or the other. And it's going to be a challenge to. Well, I'm glad you guys are the ones voting. I'm glad there's 9 of you voting on it. That was a joke, David. So, any changes, any updates? Yes.
How many and how dispersed can they be?
But I think there's
Some issues there too.
I think there's going to be staff that are horrified that their person next to them is potentially covering or carrying a weapon.
Yeah, but in the state of Wyoming, it's illegal to conceal carry right now without a permit. So how do you know who's passed?
Well, hopefully the safest place is in our schools.
You know?
Remember the days when everybody had a gun in their rack in their truck so they could go hunting after school?
Yeah, they just have them behind their seats now.
I do like the approach of doing the other steps too. I was reading in our school boards, Sandy Hook had the double entrance, but they shot their way through the first glass, so that you have to have
Because we have a gun.
there's a layer of glass. And then there was a statistic in there that there's never been a locked classroom before I entered the shop, but they locked me inside. And I'm thinking of the old building that's set over there. That had, that just turn the bolt and lock the door, just say those doors.
Because now if you walk in some of our schools, they have a really simple design. They put elastic across the handles, so it pushes in the whatever you call it, the lock, and so they're open. And if they ever wanted to lock them, striker, thank you, they just flip the rubber band and then they lock. Shouldn't really have to do that. Be nice if they would all lock electronically. That may be out of our realm, but there is money for door hardware. So we're just going to have some expert to tell us what it's going to cost. Yeah, well, now with the wireless locks, that's why Evanston Middle School can do what it does, because there are wireless lock controls. So,
That sounds like a plan.
That sounds
okay,
good.
that's what we'll move on then.
Okay,
MOA.
okay.
Does anybody else have anything for
You could
that?
probably ask MOA, Ryan, if you want to see if they want to come up and do that.
Okay.
We're just teasing.
Well, let's go ahead and move on. Our next item for discussion is our PLC consultant.
Yeah, that's good.
None of us can handle that, especially you. huh?
That would be the first shooting that
naughty down.
I
We
can't
are.
hear, so.
The suggestion was to invite our architect for Evanston Middle School to come back.
Oh, please. Okay, now I get to do
They think they're real funny.
You gotta take your digs when you get them, right?
That's right.
I wish I could say I
part of the training, part of the training.
We're not ready to laugh yet.
No, I think
Too early, too early,
it's
sorry.
still too fresh.
Sorry. My bad.
Not there yet.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm here to talk to you about a consultant that would support all of our schools and all of our staff around the idea of professional learning communities. We took a group to Sheridan in August. We took 33 people. It consisted of teachers, a couple of instructional facilitators, and several of the principals. Dr. Ingalls, Ryan, and myself also attended. Those people that attended that workshop were very energized and came back very excited about the concept. Since then, UNM Meadows had already contracted with Aaron Hansen to come in and present to their staff the idea of professional learning communities. He did that during the first week that staff were back before school started. And that was received exceptionally well also. And so based on what the principals have asked, I'm here to present the opportunity to bring Aaron Hansen into our district and provide support for professional learning communities. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that everybody is very well aware we're not hiding anything. We're being, everything you see, these are the 10 days that Aaron Hansen has. I sent him a list of days that we had for professional development, and he chose the 10 that he could do. Okay, his original thing was, I'd love to do 20 days. Well, we can't afford 20 days. I think we can afford 10. And so I sent him a list of our professional development opportunities, and these were the ones that he said that he could do. I want to show you the January 15th and 16th in particular. That provides us a really cool opportunity. On the 15th, that's Martin Luther King Day, we don't have students in session, but we do have staff. It's a staff work day. That is a fantastic day to be able to have all of our staff be able to work with Mr. Hansen. The 16th, Evanston High School will not have school because they have a state music festival. And so that would be a day that Mr. Hansen would be able to work with Evanston High School exclusively. I want to go through, I just wanted to point out those dates because they're very important. The other one is October 13th, and I'll talk about why that one is important very shortly. But I want to go through this. So this is the contract itself, the duties of the speaker. As you can see, I believe you have a copy of this in your board docs as well. The duties of the school district, what we're going to provide. And so the bottom line with the contract, that's the total cost is $46,000. You can see how those would be paid for in terms of the installments, December 31st and then May 1st. Okay. Travel, they take care of all of their own travel. Intellectual property, all of those things that are pretty standard in a contract. The freak of nature, that kind of stuff. And then obviously the signatures that would be required for the contract to go forward. Okay? All right. So now that you've seen the contract and everyone has seen the contract, let me talk about some of the reasons why I feel comfortable proposing this. I would not have felt comfortable proposing this last year. Okay? I know there's a lot of concern about consultants and a lot of heartburn over consultants. And quite honestly, in many ways, I share that. We spent an awful lot of money on consultants over the last 10 years. Many of those were in the neighborhood of $250,000 a year or more in terms of consultants. In addition to that, those people that had access to or were trained by those consultants were few in number. So you had instructional facilitators, you had select groups that were trained, and it was what we call the train the trainer model, where a select group of people get trained. We have about 30 people in our district that really know a lot of stuff, but that never really made it to the teachers in the classroom. And so the first thing that I want to tell you is the reason I feel comfortable proposing this contract is that this is a completely different model. This is about getting somebody, a professional with professional learning communities in front of our individual teachers, in front of our teachers in their schools, working with them individually. Okay, not individual teachers per se, but individual schools. Okay? So a way that this could work would be Aaron would work with grade level teams or content area teams or at the high school planning hour during the day on a PD day, during the morning session, and then in the afternoon work with a school, for example, Evanston High School, because of the large size of the staff. If he were working with the middle schools, we'd be able to combine those two staffs, and he'd be able to work with two staffs at once, and the elementary schools as well. So you partner UNT Meadows and Clark, for example, and Aspen and North, and you'd have similar sizes of groups to work with. Why the PLC training? We've talked a lot about high reliability schools. Level 1 is safe and collaborative schools. We have not really worked with staff on how to be collaborative, what that actually means, and how to go about that work. And again, those folks that had the opportunity to go to Sheridan came back very energized. Those folks that had this training at UNT Meadows, although it's only 3.5, 4 hours that they worked with them, the whole staff, they became extremely energized. So there's great potential there. So collaborative, we talked about the PLC. Professional learning communities provide the framework for the other work that we need to do. We've talked about guaranteed and viable curriculum. I talked about that at the last meeting, and how necessary that is, and how we are not where we need to be in terms of a guaranteed and viable curriculum in our district. Part of the work of a PLC is getting teachers, grade level teams, or content area teachers together so that they can determine what those priority standards are, what are the learning goals that we agree on, and how are we going to develop those assessments to measure that. And then what are we going to do with the kids that can get it, and what are we going to do with the kids that can't? And you see, I put a bunch of acronyms, and I apologize, but you have the GVC, those first two that are blue. That's really getting us towards the guaranteed and viable curriculum. That's level 3 in the high reliability schools. The assessment work is the district assessment system, which we have to have per WDE regulations. Okay? And then the last two, the facilitating the conversations about instruction, as well as facilitating conversations about what do we do with kids when they are meeting proficiency and when they're not. Those are the conversations that PLCs have. There's 4 questions that you work on in a PLC. Number 1, what do we want kids to know and be able to do? The second one is, how will we know when they've learned it? That's the assessment system. What do we do when kids get it? What do we do when they don't? Pretty simple stuff, but it's a whole lot more difficult than it sounds. Okay. How do we pay for this? 100% of this will be Title II funds, federal government. So just so you know, the Title II funds, the federal government gives money to the states for Title II, and then the states allocate money back to the districts, and they hold back some money as well. But for us, our Title II funds are, I don't want to misstate it, around $270,000 a year for professional development. We allocate money to the individual schools. We actually upped that last year, which was great, gave them some more choice at the schools. But when they said, hey, we need support, we need help around professional learning communities, I said, okay, but it's a trade, right? Money, it's a trade. So would you be willing to give up some of your money that we allocated to the individual schools? And they said yes, up to 75%. So this is supported by our principals. They've agreed to give up 75% of their allocation, and you see that total, it comes to about $29,000. The other $17,000 for the contract we would pull from our summer professional development opportunities that we typically offer. Okay. And to give you an example of how expensive this stuff is, the August trip to Sheridan that I mentioned, For 33 folks to go to that was $200 per person to register for the event. Sheridan's brilliant, by the way, and we're going to take some plays out of their playbook, by the way. But basically, a typical consultant is about $8,000 a day, is what it costs to bring somebody in. We actually paid almost the majority of one of those days for Sheridan by taking our folks up there. But anyway, registration and then hotel, food, and transportation for 33 people. That number is an approximate number. It's not an exact number, but on my Chromebook, I don't have the approximate key, so want to make sure that that's noted. But anyway, so you're talking about somewhere around $13,000 for 2 days. And Aaron, the contract with Aaron, he works for Solution Tree, and if you contract Aaron with Solution Tree, it's $8,000 a day to have him work for us. If you don't contract him through Solution Tree and you just contract with him personally, it is $6,000 a day. He has local ties to the community, so he does not have to pay for any kind of house or hotel or any of that kind of stuff. So he's willing to do it for $4,600 a day. Okay, so that's why we get the rate that we do. You know what? It is when you talk about, and you know what? I get it. I mean, I've seen the stuff that's going through the state, right? The WDE, they helped us out a ton, right? Paying $35,000 to have a STEM guy talk for 2 hours. Brilliant, right? So I understand some of the concern around consultants. But the other side of that is we can't all be experts in everything. And so a great example. Today, we had about 30 teachers at a WDE-sponsored professional development opportunity. It's about assessment literacy. It was at the Roundhouse. I worked my tail off to get that actually in Evanston last spring because I'm tired of sending people. You see how much it costs us to send people to different things. They agreed reluctantly because the last time they had a conference here, 2 people showed up. Okay? So they trusted us, we put it together, and there's about 80 people down at the Roundhouse. Several of those, by the way, are staying overnight because they've come from Saratoga, they've come from Buffalo, Natrona. So it's a community thing as well. Anyway, but those people that have gone to that today, I've not heard anybody say anything negative. As a matter of fact, those folks that went have all had positive things. Anybody that talked to me had very positive comments to say about the training itself. It's a little bit different. It's Marzano. It's similar to what we brought in here for high reliability schools. Those two are parallel. One doesn't contradict the other. So the work that we would do with Aaron is not going to contradict any of the other stuff that we're doing. Okay.
And an impact on that, 2 of the teachers that were there from schools that I sat at the table with made this comment. I'm so glad that I came because now I see the whole picture. I see why we're doing what we're doing. And they wouldn't have seen that had they not been there today. And it's not that they didn't appreciate the work that we were doing, they just didn't see the interconnectedness. And by sitting with somebody who very succinctly says this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, really brings that value to them. And it was powerful for me to hear that from this one particular teacher because there's times when she really kind of puts the brakes on and wants to know the rationale behind it, and rightfully so. So it was a good opportunity for that.
Well, that was going to be my question, is how does this work with what we're doing with Marzano?
It's very simple.
Yep. So with this, the PLCs are really the framework for doing that work. Okay, getting teachers to sit down together and work on those priority standards and those established learning goals that they agree on. That's what creates a guaranteed and viable curriculum. If Kay and I are teaching geography and he's teaching cultural geography and I'm teaching physical geography, which is what we've done in the past, that doesn't meet a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And we can't continue to do that. It's not okay. So we've got to have opportunities, we've got to have training, and then time opportunities for teachers to sit down and do that work. Because it is, I can tell you, I am very encouraged by where our teachers are, particularly the secondary schools. I don't want to speak for the elementaries, but the work that I've done with the secondary teachers, there's a lot of excitement right now around the idea of collaboration, getting together and working towards that guaranteed and viable curriculum. And having common assessments so they can actually have a conversation about how kids are doing in their class.
Kev, can I have one other thing?
Of course.
As I've completed the consolidated grant application, every year we have that for the state, that's a requirement of the feds. And as I've completed that particular application, one of those is Title IIA, and they ask this, how are you going to ensure that the professional development is ongoing, that it's valuable, that it's relevant, and that it's job embedded? This is exactly, it fits into everything and all the requirements that the state and the feds are requiring, especially under ESSA. So this is the direction really that the feds have directed the states, and the state then directed local educational agencies to follow.
So one of the really cool things, Dr. Ingalls talked about the excitement level of the folks that he talked to today. I talked about the excitement that folks had when they went to Sheridan and came back. The bottom line is we can't continue to do what we've done and only train a few. We've got to find ways to train all of our folks. It's a doggone shame that we have to be able to find ways to bring people here because we can't get everybody out. I mean, even today, we used every single substitute we have in the district. And if you were available and you didn't tell us no, you're working today. Every sub we had, because we wanted to get as many people at this training as we possibly could. It's free, with the exception of what we pay for subs. Okay? So that's the whole idea behind this. So the last thing I'll say about this is over 200 of our certified teachers will get approximately 2 days of work with this consultant for the $46,000.
So Doug, I have a question in
Yes, sir.
regards to, tell me about sustainability. Was this something that we're going to do this year and change it next year? You know, we've done the basketball thing back and forth through the years, and I'm not concerned, I think it's a good investment if we're going to stick with it, and it's something you see will cause real growth among our teachers.
I believe it will create growth for our teachers. I think it's going to, as importantly, or just more importantly, it'll create growth for our students.
So it's a process that will happen this year and then get better the next year and then continue. Is that what you're looking at?
I love the question, David, because I did have that this year, or in the meeting, the table that I was sitting at the conference. And what I told him was, this doesn't happen in a year. We couldn't possibly pull this off in a year. I can tell you, as long as I'm representing 612 schools, the guaranteed and viable curriculum is our number one goal. That we have to get to that point. We are not, right now, we teach our tails off. We have hardworking folks, we really do. And we teach and we teach and we teach, and then we cross our fingers and go, man, I hope kids do well on the ACT. I hope they do well on the test. Because we don't have a system in place that we can actually measure. The teachers that teach the same content actually look at common assessments and say, well, here's our learning goals. They're tied to the assessment blueprint for our YTOP or the ACT. How are kids doing? Where are they in relation to where they should be? And what are we going to do? Right? We'll know how kids are going to do on the ACT or the YTOP before they ever take the test. And we've not been able to do that for as long as I've been teaching. Other districts, by the way, those that are kicking our butt, they're doing this. Sheridan's had a contract with Tom Manny for about 8 or 10 years doing the PLC work.
He's Learning Tree, right?
He's Solution Tree.
Solution Tree.
Yep. Sweetwater 2 has been working with Jan Haig, who's doing the WDE training. They've been working with her for 4 years. So this stuff does not happen overnight, but the faster we can get all of our folks trained, the better off we're going to be.
Well, I was Dave, I mean, my question was going to be, is this a one-year deal, or is this something we want to plan for and budget for several years so that we continue, and especially if the model works, to continue doing?
Ryan's going to talk about the goals and the pathway to excellence. So our goals are tied to these 3 things.
Right.
Okay? Those 3 things will not happen overnight, and so this work will continue. This is, I would say, I would like to see, I I would like to see all of our courses, and this is just secondary, I would like to see all of our courses aligned, priority standards established, assessment systems in place by the end of the 2018-2019 school year. Then we can continue to start to look at validity and reliability, right? So we create the assessments, and then we measure, okay, so if kids, the ultimate test of reliability, if kids are passing all of our tests and then they don't pass the state test, the external assessment, okay, now we got to go back and we got to revisit our tests. Are the questions not rigorous enough? Okay, we can't do that work right now because we don't have anything in place. So the PLCs are the framework to make that happen. Now, that said, this is a discussion item, not an action item. I'm not sure how to go about it, to be honest with you. If you look at the first date that's on there is October 13th.
And our meeting's the 12th.
Right. So,
One on the 5th, too.
we do have a work session.
Third and one on
Third.
the 12th or something.
Right. So we will have one before this, but what I would like to, and I don't, in terms of moving this from a discussion item to an action item, that's not my desire necessarily, but I guess I would like to have something that says, yeah, Doug, go ahead and work on this and get him here on the 13th. And I can actually pull that date out, right, and pay for that date individually. It's less than $10,000, so it doesn't need board approval. And then just adjust the contract accordingly, if that's what he would need to have to be able to secure plane and that kind of stuff, because we're basically giving him 8 days. That becomes more expensive, all of that kind of stuff. Do you see where I'm going with that? So.
I have no issue, and I'm one vote, that I have no issue with getting this on the next possible agenda for approval so that he can start on the 13th under this contract.
Okay.
We can make the 5th a special meeting to vote on this, or whatever else
Or
comes up.
whatever,
which you
yeah,
think
whatever
best.
the day is, yeah.
Are we saying is the 5th not enough advance notice? Is that?
Is the 5th enough?
Well, and I, quite honestly, I didn't talk to him about it. And part of it's a little bit his fault because I asked him to get this, and I got it, honestly, I got it whenever our last board meeting was, while I was sitting at the table.
Can we not change it and vote on it today?
Yeah, well, can't we make this an action item tonight? We can, can't we?
We have to move to amend the agenda.
Yeah.
I'm fine with doing that. I think we need to go ahead.
Because
Is that a motion?
So,
There's nothing, I mean, that is the contract.
Do you want to come up here so we can hear you?
Yeah, good.
Oh, come on. Come on, Lisa. You're a great advocate for this.
Come on.
It was a fabulous opportunity. We worked with our individual schools, and I can only speak for, Lower Hall and Clark. But we are actually working together so that we can actually provide more interventions and enrichments for our kids. This has given us the time to work together, to be able to put those kids, to move those kids once they've mastered a skill. And just a very positive experience. We're not working with just a curriculum, we're actually working with what students need. And it's incredible. So,
Good to hear.
Thank you, Lisa.
Kirby's got a question.
Yes, please.
I don't have a question. I'd just say that let's move forward. I'd make the motion to modify the amendment so that we can, or the agenda so that we can take action on this tonight.
Second.
okay, second by Jenny.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So that'll be added to our action item, which will be under G, so H.
Are there any more questions that I could answer? Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
There's no more Ritz-Carlton, Dave.
There will be none of that, no. Do you need this? Do you need the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Not right away, but I will.
Dave could find his remote.
That was my first experience as an administrator.
Okay,
Orlando.
with no further discussion items.
So let's go ahead and move on to our action item. Our first Action item up is our second reading for policy EEBE-GBCB, alcohol and controlled substances testing policy.
They just want to see if you know your.
I actually said that correctly.
Can you recite the number of this policy?
Just sounds like a drunk guy trying to do this,
I
right?
can't say Pledge of Allegiance, but
Madam Chair, members of the board, our recommendation is that you approve this on second reading. There has been no changes since first reading.
okay. Yep.
So moved.
Second that motion.
So Josh did, and then second by Dave. Okay, any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving on to second reading of the policy KG and KGR facility use fees.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the only change that I made was clarification in KGR, which is a regulation. That's part of the policy that we can change without board vote. Jeff hasn't seen the change I made, and it was his suggestion to make it, so I recommend that you approve policy KG and KGR as you see in front of you, and then if Jeff still has an issue with KGR, we can make that change without board approval.
So the change is you took out fail?
No, the only thing, the change that I made from the last one you approved was a better definition of, they have to provide supervision, basically. It wasn't a complete sentence, and now it is, but we'll make sure Jeff's okay with it. I can show you that if you want. It's right here, a written plan of the event that includes a detailed description of supervision to manage and control participants and spectators within the facility. I don't even know if that's better, but it's at least a complete sentence, I think, now. So that's the only thing I changed from the last one.
Okay.
So we recommend that you approve this as proposed.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve first, second reading policy KG and KG-R facility use fees as presented by the superintendent.
I'll second that. Second by Tammy?
Tammy.
I said second.
Oh, by Tammy. Oh, I thought you said Jenny.
No, no, sorry.
She said Jamie.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you. The plan is, since this is approved, the next facility use request will be on the new form that has the new amounts. Anyone that was previous will be grandfathered in at the old rates.
Okay,
Hopefully that works for everybody.
okay, thank you.
Um,
Okay,
Sorry.
so then we're, first reading policy of GCBD professional staff leave and absences.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the board, if you remember last week, we made an exception to this policy to allow someone to take 5 general leave days in a row. And I think I hinted at that time that this policy needed to be updated. The last time this policy was updated was 1995. What's happened over time is we've changed the leave policy in the handbook, but we never came back and linked it to the board policy, which should be the first thing you do, and then the handbook reflects what policy states. So this is, I'm asking for first reading. This isn't, you haven't had a chance to look at this before, but I think it's probably something we need to move on, and I'll explain as we go. If you look at this, the policy itself was really only 3 paragraphs, and really it talked about 3 things. You can see short-term leave, maybe you can see that. Short-term leave, and then they explain short-term leave. Maternity leave shows you how old this policy is. It's because maternity and sick leave is no longer, it's referred to as FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. And then 3 is long-term or extended leaves of absence. Policy GCBADA, the other one that's listed, basically defines the short-term leave. There is no definition of marital leave, and there is no definition of long-term leave. That was all in our handbooks, which we've had forever. And so what I did is I just took that old language out and took our handbooks and inserted it. This is exactly the same language as in our handbook, and it's been in our handbook for years. Once we went to general leave, that hasn't changed in our handbook. We don't even have, general leave's not even mentioned in the old policy. And right now, everything we do is based on general leave. Has a definition of sick leave. definition of immediate family. It also includes our catastrophic leave policy, which was never, believe it or not, in policy. And so this is a serious need for update. Like I said, it's been gone over 100 times, 100 million times, because it's been in the handbook, and we've been showing it in the handbook for years and years and years. I can tell you that I think our leave policy is extremely staff-friendly. It's extremely generous. Just quickly, how general leave works is every certified staff is prorated 11 general leave days or 88 hours of leave. Within that, you can see what general leave represents. Illness, medical appointment, any academic preparation, and leave for personal reasons. So they have 11 days they can use nondescript. And it's very, very popular. Before, I would never do this, but you'd have to take the intentional flu so you could go watch your kids perform sports, because you only had really 2 personal days. This allows individuals to go support their families. If they're going to college, they can go to college without taking sick leave. It's actually been, I think, very popular. I've shared with you before, our teacher attendance is excellent. We average about 9.7 absences per faculty member, which is good when you consider most individuals is up to 15. So there's also a leave incentive, but it is not in this policy. It sits in our handbook. So that's general leave. Our catastrophic leave policy is probably one of the best things that we do for staff, probably next to our bereavement policy. Maybe not even aware, but we allow, in case of a death of immediate family member, this bereavement policy, which is 3 days of paid leave. Does not come off their sick leave, does not come off their general leave, and it's an exceptional policy. It can go up to 5 if there's a reason that they need more time. Typically travel, if there's a death in Florida and they have to travel to Florida, or they're considered executors of a will and they take more time, they can ask and they can get up to 5. They can take more time than that, but typically anything after 5 is their own leave.
I didn't see in the policy, Ryan, but is the general leave, those 11 days or 88 hours, is that still limited to 3 in a row?
Yes.
Otherwise-
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's the highlighted area. And that was the part that,
There you go.
yeah,
Okay.
that was the part that you made an exception to. So you really made an exception to the handbook, not policy. So I can answer other questions about leave. You can see that it's very detailed. Other than bereavement, there's catastrophic, official district requested. FMLA is the one that deals with maternity, the old maternity policy. FMLA is a federal program that's actually very good for employees. You're protected up to 12 weeks of leave if you have a serious medical illness in yourself or an immediate family member. And so it's a great protection. Something that I think probably the federal government got right for large businesses like us, may hurt small businesses, but it's good for us. We also have leave for EEA and WE activities that have not changed over the years. Jury duty subpoena explains that. Extended long-term leave, as I said, was never in policy. Now it is. Basically, that's at the discretion of the board. The board has to approve any long-term leave for a certified staff member. Typically, a leave of absence is for a year. It explains that. You have to approve that because they do have tenure. If they have tenure, they're allowed to come back at a position, same position, may not be in the same building, but those have to be approved by the board. Long-term leave for support staff is not approved by the board. That's, you guys give me that discretion. You can see sabbatical, probably the least used leave category we have. I can't even remember the last time. I can remember the last time it was used, but it was maybe 20 years ago. And the policy wasn't followed, and it caused a lot of problems. And basically, in terms of educational support, it is a very good policy, but it's just too expensive to go to school now. This sabbatical policy provides half salary with the guarantee that they come back for 2 years, and a daily allotment or a monthly allotment, but the monthly allotment isn't enough. But we just haven't had anyone request sabbatical leave. You can see the catastrophic leave, which is an excellent policy. If you're familiar with that, I can donate 1 day, and if there's a catastrophic event in my life or in the life of my immediate household, which is my spouse, I can be covered up to 91 days of paid leave. And it shows you the procedure. This used to be misused and abused, but since we put these requirements in, it hasn't been abused. How that works is I donate one of my leave days by a certain date. if that leave day is not used, it's given back to me at the end of the school year. Probably for the last 10 years, we've always given a portion of those leaves back to anyone who's contributed. Support staff is similar, except their bank isn't as large. They only can get 30 days. So, but again, that's a lot about leaves. I think it's a very good policy. It just needs to be updated. This shows you that it was.
I can't believe you haven't had this in the policy.
I can't either. So it's probably pretty good that every once in a while we dig into those policies to see where we are, and that's one of the reasons why the old policy allowed me to make the decision on the change of leave, but because it wasn't in policy, I figured I need to come to you guys. So my recommendation is that you approve this at first reading, and then next board meeting we'll approve this second reading.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve policy GCBD, professional staff leave absences on first reading?
Second?
Okay, any discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. So then what about the,
GCBDA we're just going to abandon.
okay, okay. So
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not going to do that any
so
longer.
we're not having to worry about that?
Yeah.
Okay,
So there's nothing new, it just, since we already covered short-term leaves, we're just going to
Okay.
abandon that one.
okay. So let's move on to item E, which is approve the 2017-18 strategic plan.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we haven't changed any of this from our last meeting, but I did want to point out here under the district goal, by 2022, all Uinta County School District #1 schools will be certified as high reliability schools in levels 1, 2, and 3. This is, I guess, my commitment that I'd like to, at least for 5 years, not bring something new in every year. So the focus on level 1, level 2, and level 3, which you've already talked about. We may change the emphasis on indicators, but that's simply because if we've met something or exceeded the requirement, let's work on something else within those indicators. But in terms of our goal, we want to be certified as a high reliability school by 2022. So that's kind of my commitment to you, that it's not the flavor of the month. This PLC is what our principals want, and I believe you'll see that it's what our staff wants. So, other than that, the only thing that we need to update is the board goals. I sent a copy of the 5 that were drafted from last meeting.
And
I was just going to say, in this discussion, what we thought would be best, as we talked about last week, is that you just get a chance to vote on these 5. If there are others you want to add, we can do that too. If there's wording you don't like, we can change that. My suggestion is that we have no more than 3. If you focus on more than 3, you're probably going to lose a lot of focus. I can tell you that all 5 of these are something I'm committed to in the long term anyway. So it's not that we won't be moving forward or working on them, but I think in terms of a board, you need to focus on at least 3. So what was suggested is that you vote on 3, your top 3 choices, and then we'll just do the top 3 win. And those will be our board goals in this 17-18 strategic plan.
We have secret ballot.
You can.
Priority, and then
Can't we just mark
or do you
this
just want
page?
us to?
Yeah, we
I
can
just circle 3, and then
just circle 3, and
Yeah.
then we can tally them up.
we'll tally them.
Necessarily in the order.
Yeah, any changes, any additions, anything you'd like to see differently? Oh, good. It's okay while I'm just going to read through the 5 board goals. Number 1 was support standard and assessment work K-12 with the goal of providing a guaranteed and viable curriculum. 2 is improve board participation in professional development and training. 3 is continued implementation of the district's communication plan. 4 is emphasis on school safety and security, including Enroll Act 93, which is possession of firearms by school employees, policy development and implementation. And 5 is emphasis on increasing concurrent enrollment opportunities for high school students. Those were the 5 that we came up with last week.
Can somebody explain to me what improving the board participation in professional development and training, is that board training?
That was us, yeah, us being.
Our training.
Our
Mhm.
training,
Okay. I was like, what?
It's interesting, I can't remember who told me that one of our ex-board members made a statement, I think he made it to Joe, is how important it is that the board participates in those trainings. My encouragement is if you can only do that so often, it is the Wyoming School Board training that you probably need to attend in Casper. But the National School Board conventions, you need to attend those, one of those at least in the tenure while you're on the board. Because what you get a perspective is a national perspective on education, not just our little Wyoming here. Funding is always tight, but we always budget at least 3. So it's something that I think Cassie went last year. And typically, one of the superintendents have gone, and I've gone with them. We always go to the Wyoming School Board's one, but it's something you need to, that's why that goal is there. You look at the plaques on the wall, that's basically representation of our board's commitment to training and development. You're recognized when a board gets trained. So that's what that one is. Are we ready? You want to tally them up first and then, oh, they're tallying them? Good. Good man. Do you want to move on to the next thing and then we can come back to that?
Yeah, we can do that. So let's go ahead and move on to the approve the transportation compliance letter.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this is the annual compliance items that we have to get approved to. Basically, it's approving that we will be reimbursed from WDE Chapter 20 rules. And it's the same thing, basically it's been every year, except this year I did at EMS, we are going to take exception to running the red lights in that loading zone because it is blocked off to anything but bus traffic. However, we still have to run the red lights in the 2 that are adjacent to the public travel lanes. So we will be running red lights in part of the zone and not in the rest. And that's on page 3. And also this year, I found out when I talked to the WDE about a route for vocational programs at the high school and Horizon, we have to have all of our routes approved, which we used to just approve the exceptions to the walking distance. But we should be getting all of our routes approved. So I just put in here the statement that the bus routes as published in the Uintah County Herald annually, unless you would like me to get you all the bus routes so you can go through them and approve them.
You're only one of 9.
And I did add on there, besides the ones that are published, the 3 suburban routes, and that allows us to get those Suburbans reimbursed as buses from the WDE. It would be the 3 Suburbans, 2 at the high school and 1 at Horizons. Those are used to transport students from the school to job sites, to look at, Doug could probably tell you more than I could, but to look at other places they're going, for the vocational classes. And I know Brett Martin uses them quite a bit. Brent Martin for the building trades to go to job sites. So anyway, that's the purpose of those. And I have to have a signed copy of this on file at the bus barn every year.
So this is on for an action item.
Yes, yes.
Can I
Any
ask
questions?
one question? Yeah.
Yes.
And it doesn't really have anything to do with the routes, but I got a question the other day about are certain children assigned a bus stop based upon where they live, or can they go to any bus stop on the route within that area?
The kids are assigned a bus stop, but if parents want to send them to another bus stop, all they have to do is let us know, and we have let several parents, we can't tell them their kids have to get on a certain spot, but we are responsible for picking them up or dropping them off at a particular spot, and that we're liable for those students. So if they want to change where we're picking them up or dropping them off, they can, but we can't just pick the kids up anywhere they go. They have to have a particular stop. Whether the parents choose it or we assign them. If the parents don't like it, they can move them.
Apparently, the stop that they're assigned is actually further away than a closer stop, and they kept sending their kids to a closer stop, but the bus driver was getting cranky because they weren't going to the one further away, so.
Is this in Aspen Grove?
That area, yes.
Okay, I think I've spoken to that man.
Okay.
And his student had chosen the stop at the beginning of the year and gotten off at a different stop than he normally would. The driver took it for granted that was his assigned stop, and anyway, we straightened it out.
Okay.
Yes. That kind of thing does happen.
Well, we don't want you to get too hard to get along with, because at any given day, there's at least one car chasing the bus down Highway 150.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And as I say, if a parent doesn't like where the stop is, well, all they have to do is call and we change it. And kids often will ask to get off somewhere else. And if they ask and say, well, my mom said we could do it, we will call the parent and ask them if that is what they want.
Or they need to call the barn and talk to them.
And then, like special services, and I'm not sure if this is a law or if this was Glenna Calm's, Glenna Calm's actual just policy, but we allow up to 3 stops for special services because that can change a lot. And other students have, we get notes all the time. We allow, parents to give us notes to, like a kid wants to ride home with his grandparents, to his grandparents one day, and et cetera.
So that's something you would have them write a note, hand it to the bus driver themselves.
Yes, or parents call us, and usually if they do a lot, Highway 150 is definitely one of the high ones for this, is they'll just do a yearly note and say, for the rest of the year, please allow my student to get off at such and such a stop. And we just file the note and do that.
Not really having to do with approving the bus routes, but
No.
thank you. I was getting the question, so.
Certainly.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the transportation compliance letters?
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the transportation compliance letters as stated by Mr. Dixon.
I'll second that.
Second by Tammy. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So let's move on to the bus financing.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the board, first off, you have an audit that has appeared on your desk. And so that will be approved on the 10th of October. We'll have Mr. DeCoria coming. So you can read it and then, bring your
I thought
questions.
you were gonna say it was approved reading. Ooh.
Yeah. So.
If you haven't some.
Yeah. So, but, I would suggest bring it on the 10th because I'm sure he's going to reference it. Is that? So the memo that I sent out, we have received 2 buses that you approved, and it's been the last 3 years. It's been, the buses show when they show, and so because I wasn't arranging financing, 6 months with the 6 months different. I waited until the buses come. So the buses are here, and I need you, requesting that you approve the buses. Otherwise, your fund balance is going to be really different. So we have requesting financing for $297,276, which is the price of the 2 buses. This will be the last year that the state, until they lift the moratorium, will allow bus financing. And so otherwise what would happen is that we've already expensed the buses And so we would get 20% of the reimbursement this year if it was a no vote.
If we don't vote for this now.
Yes.
I think it's a no-brainer. I move that we approve the financing of the buses.
Second.
Okay. Second by Josh. Josh, he was louder. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
John, is this what I got in trouble for with football jerseys one time?
What?
Waited until they got delivered before you had it
Paid
approved.
for?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Only this time this was a plan.
We approved the ordering of the buses.
You approved the ordering
We
of the
actually
buses.
approved this ahead of
Yes.
time.
It's just the financing. So I will go out.
Yeah.
I'll bring out, I will bring back what I find, and then you can, choose to approve the financing once that's done. So this is just allowing me to go out and look for.
Go do it.
So, okay.
Go do it. Okay, so do we want to go to our board goals or?
It's up to you.
Okay, let's go ahead and just finish out our action items and go to the PLC consultant. Is there a motion to approve the PLC consultant?
So moved.
Okay, by Kirby.
Second that.
Pick one.
So, okay, any discussion or other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so, let's jump back up to our board goals for our strategic plan.
Okay, it looks like the vote was, number one was the largest vote getter, which is support standard and assessment work K-12 with the goal of providing a guaranteed viable curriculum. Just want you to know, that's probably the first time I can remember the board has taken the position that that is a priority. And it is a priority, and so I appreciate you guys feeling that way. Goal 3, continue to implement of the district's communication plan, which is very important. And goal 4 is emphasis on school safety and security, including Roll Act 93. So that's what our 3 goals will be for 17-18.
And the others are also important.
They are.
They are,
Yes.
and as I mentioned, they're a commitment of mine anyway, but, and we'll continue them. So what we need to do now, Madam Chair, is approve the strategic plan as written. Like I said, nothing was changed from the last time we talked, and just addition of those 3 goals.
Okay,
So I'd recommend that you approve the strategic plan for 2017-18.
okay. Is there a motion to approve the 2017-18 strategic plan?
So moved.
That was
Second
by
that
Jenny
motion.
and second by Dave. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. So that concludes our action items. So our next item on our agenda is executive session for personnel. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
Now, Madam Chairman, I move that we move into executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Motion passes. Okay,
There is one action item to come back to.
yes.
So we'll be quick.
So we shouldn't be too long, and we will come back for one item. Like, is it gonna be long enough that I need to go to the bathroom before? I would hope not, but.
I had to do that already.
Oh, gosh.
Come on, Rudy.
So you can go to the 42, pull it up, and see what, I think I rolled the budgets across, so you can kind of see that one. What I have not done is, you should have, last time I printed out the 43 was zeros. Yeah. took whatever your ending balance, positive and negative, and just took that and then moved it to your starting balance. Okay. So then, whatever you spent, it should be in there. So, I have not set up any accounts for the new title, for title assessment.
For the 17-18 stuff? That's fine. I just want to see what.
That's, yeah.
No, I'm with you. Well, I haven't even submitted, I can't submit it.
So,
The page is large to everybody.
you're far, it's February or March.
Next year.
We were at 12, now we're down to 4. The other 4 drop out. Are you being
Why?
When you see your picture on the fridge so they know what you look like, that's good. You've got to change your
Text messaging is the most valid device of communication, something's wrong. Yeah. Have a good night, guys.
It wasn't us.
I stole Doug's. Everybody's gone. We were at 12. We're down to 4 people watching now. I guess as long as they hold out, I'll hold out. So are you recording it? Yeah. We're streaming on TV too.
Oh. So where's the camera?
What's that?
Where's the camera?
It's right there.
It's up there.
Yeah, it's not.
Oh, I see it.
Right by the projector.
I got it. That's probably a smart company.
You know something impressive about the community?
A little bit.
Maybe keep some people from coming in here, but. No way they're all recorded and they're all public and nobody can say that.
That kind of start. What was happening?
Yeah. I think we all agree it's a good idea. Like I said, now they're all public, they're all on YouTube, you can go back and watch previous ones if you want. They're all, all very open.
Because I know some of those other ones, when you watch them, everything was down here, so you never saw up here necessarily. It was all.
Yeah.
So how many watching?
We were at 12, we're at 5 now, so. We'll see how long they hold out. I guess I'll hold out as long as they hold out. could have probably zoomed in on it while they had it up on the right. I'll have to look at the setting in the camera and see if I can mirror. Cause yeah, you're right, the text will be backwards. No, I wouldn't do it.
stayed.
Yeah, we have reasonable standards by which we follow. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for everybody's patience. Is there a motion to reconvene our regular session?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So let's move on to our next action item, which is to approve the Evanston Parks and Recreation Department Board appointments.
Madam Chair, I would move that the board appoint Cody Bateman and Bubba O'Neill to serve the open seats on the Rec District Board.
Okay,
Second that motion.
okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Down to our round table. I have one thing that I just wanted to share. I've seen the red Suburban and the little trailer that we have around town and in the parking lot, and it looks sharp. I was very impressed. So I didn't realize how sharp it would look together. So good representation out of town.
Good. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, looks very nice. Does anybody have anything else?
We got homecoming this week. It's a pretty exciting week for the youth of our community. Nothing like high schoolers. They're the best. Anyway, I encourage all of you to get out and watch our kids participate. I watched the game last week, and Evanston was right in there the first half. If they could have caught a couple of balls, they'd have won the game. It's just a receiver situation. I'm sure Kay could attest to that. So it was a good game, too. So I think our kids are right in there. Let's get out there and go Red Devils.
Okay. Anything else?
Madam Chair, just an update on the enrollment. I think I told you last week, I would tell you. Right now, we're at 2,700 students, exactly where we ended last school year. The interesting thing, though, is we lost 33 students at UNM Meadows. We picked up 55 at the high school as part of that. So we're at the same number of students, but the high school gained some kids and UNM Meadows dropped some kids. 2,700 is kind of a scary number. That's about 110 down from the beginning of school last year.
Oh, goodness.
But it's level.
It's level.
Okay.
They're going from UME to the high school.
Hey, we're doing really well then.
Find out who's teaching them.
Oh, goodness.
That's accelerating.
What time, does anybody know break times and all that kind of
4:30.
4:30 parade?
Yeah, as usual. Same old times, Kay.
Is it pep rally at 7?
Mm-hmm.
7? Thursday? Thursday.
Thursday night.
6:30. I thought it was.
6:30?
If you go at 6:30, you'll get a seat.
Yeah.
I better go at 6.
I thought it was 6:30.
Okay, I just didn't know what time.
I'm pretty sure it's on the high school
So
website.
when's the lighting of the
Okay.
E and
I got a note,
bonfire and all
Bonfire.
that?
These kids know nothing of what
Bonfire
homecoming
is
used to be.
1978, Kay.
Yeah.
No, we
Oh,
had
no,
one
no, no,
the year
no,
I
it was
was
like
here.
in 90.
93, 92, we had them.
92 or 93, that was like the last year.
Thanks, Jenny.
It wasn't me.
Appreciate it.
I think it was 93 or 94 was
So
actually
Actually, it
last
was my
year.
sister. So
Oh, okay.
Somebody threw something in the fire.
somebody
yeah.
threw something in the bonfire, and then they got in a wreck in the
blew up.
honk out. That
It
was
was
all
a-
the same year.
It was a
I was
can.
there.
That was a bad year.
It was a bad
Yeah,
year.
we know who the principal was.
Menacing.
When was the last time they burnt the E on the hill?
It was Jill's boss.
Oh,
I remember that.
Principal at that time.
Yeah, it was bad.
I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Some of the new traditions, they take the freshmen up and they do a E, get a camera to take a picture of the E, then they'll run it backwards, so you'll see the E or the year, then they all break into woods. It's pretty cool.
I will say that my daughter, the freshman, that was a very cool thing for her. She came back just talking about how fun it was to be able to go to the UNAs and how cute the senior boys, that my mentor is, Mom. Don't put that in the paper, she'll kill me. But she loved it, and it was a great, she said they cheered and learned all the cheers and learned the song, and it was sort of a great orientation where they couldn't be on their phones, so.
Good.
Good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good.
Okay.
Cool.
Anything else?
I just want to say thank you to you guys who have done the PLC work in the district, because it's been a long time since I've seen people be really excited about something and about the direction that we're moving, and it's just, as a board member, that's what you want. You want people to be excited and to have motivation and energy to move all in a direction, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay, well, with nothing left, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.